Hi everyone, I'm Maria and this is Pictus channel. Today we will look at Montefortino type helmet, one of the most famous Roman helmets. There is even an opinion that no less than 3 or 4 million of them were made. And I wanted to say, we finally got to Roman helmets. Because in my view, Montefortino type helmets are directly associated with the Roman legionaries of Republic era. A truly Roman helmet. You see legionary, it means he must have a Montefortino helmet on his head, and vice versa. You see Montefortino, it means a Roman legionary wore it. But such statements are incorrect for two reasons. First, they were used not only by Romans, but also by their neighbors on the Apennine Peninsula. For example, this is a Etruscan helmet, and it is also a Montefortino. Second, the helmet itself has Celtic origin, and the name comes from the Celtic necropolis near the town of Montefortino, not far from Ancona in Italy. 12 such helmets were found there in 1899. And here are the sources I used when creating the video. All articles are available online. And here is the plan for today. Since the helmet is Celtic, let's start with Celts and take a look at the map where they lived. Then we will go through Celtic helmets, indicate where different helmets were found, including Montefortino, Coolus and Agen-Port types. Then we will move on to the Montefortino to see how it spread across Italy. We will talk about the quality of the helmets, stamps and mass production. Then we will move on the typology of Montefortino helmets and discuss general development trends. Then the helmet construction, types of cheek pieces, and I will tell you one funny archaeological story about the Montefortino helmet. So, as we have already established, the Montefortino helmet, which at first glance might seem originally Roman, actually has Celtic roots. So let's talk a bit about the Celts themselves. There are many different theories about the origin of the Celts, but we wouldn't delve into the intricacies of the Indo-European migrations and Proto-Celtic cultures today, because this is a topic for separate lengthy discussion. So let's limit ourselves to how the Celts began their expansion across Europe and how they ended up in Apennine Peninsula. So for our story today, let's agree that by roughly the 7th or 6th century BC, we see the formation of Celtic tribes in the region we know today as southern Germany and neighboring territories. By the beginning of the 5th century BC, these tribes occupied vast territories of Western Europe, from modern Austria and Switzerland to Belgium and Luxembourg, as well as separate areas of France, Spain and even the British Isles. During the 4th century BC, they continued their movement eastward, reaching the Balkans. And at the beginning of the 3rd century, some Celts crossed into Asia Minor, where they eventually settled in the region that becomes known as Galatia. These eastern Celts are often called Galatians. Also, during the 4th century BC, the Celts crossed the Alps and invaded northern Italy. The first to reach the Po River Valley were Insubres. They settled in the area that today we know as Lombardy, and made Mediolanum, or modern Milan, the main city. Following the Insubres came other Celtic tribes, the Boii, Lingones, Cenomani, and many others. They gradually conquered most of the Po River Valley, and eventually pushed the Etruscans, who had lived there before, back behind the Apennine Mountains. The last of large Celtic tribes to reach Italy were the Senones. They descended to the Adriatic coast and occupied the lands north of Ancona. By the way, it was the Senones who carried out a very daring raid on Rome at the beginning of the 4th century BC. By the way, the name Celts, which we use today, came to us from the Greek language. The Greeks called these people Keltoi, and the Romans, however, when they encountered the Celts in the river Po Valley and in the territory of the modern France, called them Gauls or Galli. Now let's look at the Celtic helmets themselves. You've probably come across illustrations like this one from Peter's Connolly book. While this diagram might look quite straightforward, Connolly himself points out that the fine spots of these helmets are scattered over a wide area, making it quite difficult to build a clear chronological chain. To better illustrate this, I have prepared a small helmet images, and as we will discuss each type, I will place it on the map in the location where it was found, and hopefully this visual approach will help us. So, characteristic feature of Montefortino helmet include a neck guard, more or less conical dome, movable cheek pieces, and a small knob on the top, which also serve as an attachment for decoration or for crest. But the most important thing is this small neck guard. This is Etruscan and Roman classic variant of the helmet. Similar neck guards are also be found on the helmets used in France and Austria in the 5th century BC. This is a bronze helmet found in the Somme region in France. This bronze helmet was found in Dürnberg by Hallein in Austria. Both have an elongated shape and, importantly, a neck guards. And probably this type of helmet appeared in Italy along with the Senones. Iron helmet from Hallstatt in Austria. I got so carried away coloring the helmets that I choose the wrong color here. This helmet is actually iron, not bronze. Interestingly, Connolly mentions the Hallstatt piece as a potentially related to the origin of the Coolus type helmets, dating it around 4th century BC. This could be one of the early prototypes of this type. A spherical shape is indeed characteristic of the Coolus. However, the neck guard on this particular example is very small. I will continue to refer to this helmet as Coolus, as that seems to be the more common name. But note that the correct name for this type is Calou, after the find location in France, and I hope I pronounce it somewhat correct related to French language. Another bronze helmet found in Montpellier, France. It has a small neck guard and a near spherical shape, 4th century BC. In the early 5th century BC, Celtic armorers used both bronze and iron, but by the end of the century, iron completely replaced bronze. These iron examples are much closer in shape to the later helmets considered as true Montefortinos. This is bronze helmet found in a Senon burial in Italy. It is now in the Ancona Museum, dating up to 282 BC. Like the next two helmets, it belongs to a type used by the Senones who inhabited the Adriatic coast. Bronze helmets are relatively rare for the Senones. They were typically made of iron or iron and bronze, like the next example. Iron Celtic Montefortino helmets have been found throughout northern and eastern Italy, especially around Bologna, Perugia, and Ancona, but most importantly at the Celtic necropolis of Montefortino, which gave this helmet type its name. This helmet was found in the Senon necropolis at Montefortino and is also kept in the Ancona Museum. The helmet dome is made of bronze, but it has a complex composite attachment for the crest made of iron. Along with the other helmets from the Senon burials, it dates to the period before 282 BC and has a characteristic neck guard. Connolly specifically notes that the three-disc cheek pieces, possibly adopted from the Italic people, specifically the Samnites. Do you remember the three-disc breastplate? We talk about it in more details in this video. This is iron helmet from Umbria, now in the Berlin Museum. Like the previous two, this helmet was also found in a Senon context. Note the decorations on the sides. This is the 4th century BC. This is Etruscan bronze Montefortino type helmet, housed in the Villa Giulia Museum. As you can see, the Etruscans also adopted the Montefortino type helmet. Three-disc cheek guards are often found on Etruscan helmets. This is 4th century BC. Another type of cheek guards was like this, with two cutouts. You have already encountered it on a Greek helmets. This bronze helmet, possibly of Italic workmanship, was found in Montefortino, and is kept in Ancona Museum. It's 4th century BC. This is probably what you imagine when you hear the word Montefortino. However, as you can see, the Montefortino type helmet includes significant variations, both in dome shape and in cheek guard design. The next two Coolus and 3 Montefortino helmets belong to the 3rd century BC. This is a bronze helmet found in France, Marne region. Connolly classifies this helmet as Coolus type. Just a reminder that the classic legionary Coolus looks like this. Kenomani bronze helmet. This Kenomani helmet may also be an early form or a prototype of the Coolus or Kalu. As you can see, the fine spots of similarly shaped helmets are quite far apart. The legionary Coolus is typically considered a more advanced and later model compared to the legionary Montefortino. However, as you can see, the prototypes of both helmets have equally ancient origins. Iron helmet from Castellerotto in Italian Alps. This and the next helmet are examples of Alpine Montefortino helmet, which, as Connolly notes, were made exclusively of iron. Note the design of cheek guards with the 3 circular elements. Iron helmet from Batina. As mentioned, Connolly notes that Montefortino type was widespread across the Celtic world, confirmed by this example from the Balkans. And again, notice the 3 circular elements on the cheek guards, although this is quite a deviation from the original style. Iron helmet from Sanseno in Italian Alps, and it is getting a bit crowded on the map. And a bronze helmet found in France. This is 1st century BC. As you can see, both Celtic helmet types, the Coolus and Montefortino, had a neck guard, but the Coolus had a spherical shape, while the Montefortino was slightly conical or pointed. Plus, the Montefortino has a knob for the crest attachment. This is iron helmet from Port at Nidau in Switzerland. This represents so-called port type, which appeared in 1st century BC. A characteristic feature of it is a specially shaped neck guard, which was riveted on separately. Connolly notes that the port type became a direct prototype of the imperial Gallic helmet. Iron helmet from Giubiasco in Ticino, Swiss Alps. This is Agen type. According to Connolly's description, it resembles a bowl hat with a brim. This type got its name from the initial find spots in the city of Agen in France. If I found the right image, here is the helmet found in Agen that gives this type its name, although the accuracy of some captions online is a bit questionable. Sometimes examples of Agen and Port helmets are designated as an Agen-Port type, but you know that the Port has a more massive neck guard. Both Agen and Port type helmets were made of iron, and significantly, they adopted an oval dome shape in cross-section, which better fits the human head. Furthermore, while early helmet typically had a triangular cheek pieces with 3 decorative discs resembling Samnite breastplates, the Agen and Port type cheek guards offered better protection. Forward projections covered the cheekbone and jaw without obstructing the viewer's vision. This specific type of cheek guards became a standard for the subsequent Roman helmets. And it is quite safe to say that the Agen-Port type largely determines the origin of imperial Gallic helmet worn by legionaries during the Principate. Agen-Port type helmets themselves were also used in Roman troops, albeit for a very short time. Such helmets were likely used by the Celtic auxiliary troops storming Rome, providing a probable pathway to their adoption by regular legionaries. it is generally accepted that the Montefortino helmet was brought to Italy by invading Celtic tribes and began its spread from the northern part across the Apennine Peninsula. Initially it was adopted by the Etruscans, and this, by the way, is a Roman one, but quite late. As you can see, both are characterized by conical shape and a small neck guard. By the late 5th or early 4th century BC, bronze Montefortino helmets, now made by local armorers, had spread throughout the northern central Italy, roughly in the modern Tusca-Emilian region, centered around Bologna, Florence, and Perugia. Interestingly, even helmets of this type found in Celtic burials sometimes have Etruscan inscriptions, suggesting they were likely spoils of war rather than Celtic imports. By the late 4th or early 3rd century BC, the Montefortino spread much wider, with finds in Umbria, southern Etruria, Abruzzi, Campania, and even Sicily. The concentration of these helmets in the Po River Valley was very high in the late 3rd and early 2nd century BC, associated with Roman military campaigns of this time. By the end of the 3rd century BC, the Montefortino helmet was present across the entire Apennine Peninsula, with the Roman army being one of the main forces driving the spread. Up until approximately the end of the 4th century BC, the Roman army often fought in a dense formation resembling the Greek phalanx. As you already know from previous videos, helmets of Greek origin were used in Italy. For example, Attic, Chalcidian, and Apullo-Corinthian types. These helmets of Greco-Etruscan tradition continued in use until the 1st century BC, and perhaps even into the early imperial period, likely for the ceremonial use. However, by the beginning of the 4th century BC, they were largely replaced by conical helmets of the Celtic tradition. Here, let's look at when Romans shifted to new tactics. Approximately from the beginning of the 4th century BC, during the Latin and subsequent Samnite Wars, the Roman army began moving from the phalanx-like formation and gradually transitioned to more flexible manipular tactics. Parallel to this, the Montefortino helmets we are discussing began to spread across the Apennine Peninsula. I don't know if there is a connection between the change in tactics and the new helmet model, or it could simply be a coincidence that the Celts arrived at this time and brought the Montefortino helmet, which was favored by the Romans. But the spread of the Montefortino helmet was not limited to Italy. In the 3rd and 2nd centuries BC, this type of helmet appears in southern France and Iberia. This was almost certainly a result of Roman expansion in these regions, although, of course, there was also some local production. By the late 2nd and early 1st century BC, Roman Montefortino helmets were found deeper in Gaul, for example in the upper reaches of Allier and Rhona rivers, and after Caesar's famous campaigns in Gaul and Germania, and then during the further imperial campaigns, these helmets spread throughout Western Europe up to Rhine border. So the spread of Montefortino helmet can be seen as a sort of indicator of Roman troop movements as the expansion of Roman Empire. Wherever the Romans went, this helmet went too. And it became very popular not only among Roman forces, but interestingly among the Carthaginians as well. Yes, in one source I saw information that the Carthaginians equipped their mercenary troops during the campaigns with the helmets of similar design. It is also known that Hannibal issued captured Roman weapons to his troops after the battles of Lake Trasimene and Cannae. Examples found in Iberian Peninsula could have belonged to the Carthaginians also, although the helmets themselves were made in Italy. Therefore, it's not always clear who used the found helmets, Roman or enemy forces. And here it seemed extremely interesting to me that the borrowing of Celtic helmets model was not a one-way movement. It might seem that the Celts practically imposed the helmets on Italic people. But remember the Vitulonia helmet with the keel and the Negao type helmet. First, appearing in the Etruria, it spread to the Celtic territories, where the local variants were made. This shows mutual influence. and you can find more details about the Gulyaeva type helmet in this video. Although many helmets from Republican period have survived, paradoxically only a few of them can be directly linked to the Roman army. Most Montefortino helmets come from the burials. This is because there was no standing army before the Marian reforms. Military equipment, including helmets, was the personal property of a person who served in the army, and was taken home after the military campaign ended. However, there are also helmets found outside of burial context, for instance, several finds of Iberian Peninsula. And in northern Italy, a helmet with a Latin inscription was found. The style of the inscription allows it to be dated to the second half of the 3rd century BC, which clearly confirms the use of this helmet type by Roman soldiers during this period. Regarding the Marian reforms, there is another interesting trend: a certain simplification and decline in helmet quality. As you may recall, before reforms, the helmet was a personal property of those entering military service. This meant each soldier was responsible for their own gear, purchasing or commissioning it. This situation fostered small-scale production, likely with more attention to detail and quality, as it was a soldier's personal investment. However, the situation changed after Marian reforms. The creation of a standing professional army drastically increased the need for standardized equipment, including helmets. As I mentioned earlier, an estimated 3 to 4 million such helmets were produced. Providing an army with such quantities required production to become mass-scale and faster. Indeed, it worth noting that a trend towards simplified forms and reduced manufacturing quality existed even before Marian reforms. Look at Paddock's Type 5 helmets from the 3rd-2nd century BC. It showed less careful finish and coarse decoration. This trend likely intensified after the reforms due to increased demand, as evidenced by later helmet types. From Paddock it is Type 8 and 9 after 2nd century BC, which also show less confident craftsmanship and coarse finish. Interestingly, some Montefortino helmets feature rare stamps, interpreted as a maker's marks. 3 such helmets have been found in Italy. Unlike typical owner's mark, they are neatly stamped into the bronze, resembling blacksmith's marks, indicating that they were applied during manufacture. For instance, one helmet bears this stamp, likely short for "from Quintus Cossius, son of Quintus," a maker's name. Other helmets have similar hidden marks like this. The presence of such marks made by private makers suggests that significant large-scale production already exists. Livy provides a striking example of such large-scale order. In 205 BC, Publius Cornelius Scipio, preparing for his campaign in Africa, demanded 3,000 helmets be made solely by the masters of Arretium, a city of Etruria. This demonstrates that production system capable of fulfilling such large orders existed even before Marian reform. However, since helmets with stamps have been found dating both before and after the Marian reforms, These marks confirm that large-scale private production was already developing and prepared for the increased demand that arose with the standing professional army. Okay, it's time to delve deeper into the technical details of Montefortino helmets, but first a few words on typology. Regarding the typology of Roman helmets, there are several approaches, for example, the continental system and the Russell-Robinson system, and I will probably cover this in a separate short video. But concerning this helmet, all systems classified as Montefortino. Originally, helmet types with neck guards were referred to as jockey caps. This category includes Montefortino, Coolus, and any other classic bronze helmet with a protruding neck guard for neck protection, and with a conical or hemispherical dome shape. In 1975, Russell Robinson proposed dividing this broad category into two subgroups, Montefortino and Coolus. And the correct pronunciation is Calu. You remember that, right? And in this matter, there seems to be a consensus in the scientific community. However, distinguishing subtypes within the Montefortino helmet type is debated. Russell Robinson and Coarelli identify 4 subtypes. Paddock identifies 12. Both, however, seems to belong to British school, meaning it's not continental system. Robinson divided bronze Montefortino helmets from the appearance in Italy in the early 4th century BC to the final disappearance in the second half of the 1st century AD into 4 broad categories, types A, B, C, and D. And by the way, another source citing Russell Robinson typology states that he has 6 subtypes of Montefortino helmet, so I'm a bit confused here. And if you know the exact answer, please write it in the comment section. A relatively weak point here is that his typology is based only on 13 examples, some even without dates. Also, about 2/3 of all known Montefortino helmets were found in 19th century or earlier, and there are simply no precise records of the context and associated items. Also, Robinson completely ignores Etruscan-made helmets fitted with 3-disc cheek guards. And remember, this was 1975. In 1993, in his work, Paddock identifies 12 types. He relies on dated examples found in 12th century, including examples with 3-disc cheek guards. Now let's discuss trends in how Montefortino helmet shapes changed. I will not list the features of all subtypes now. I will just outline the general trend, and I decided not to redraw everything on paper, but for our convenience I have compiled all illustrations from Paddock according to types onto one sheet. And I will attach it on my Patreon, and it will be available for everyone even without subscription. So here are trends you can observe in development of Montefortino. From solid to composite helmets. Early helmets were solid cast bronze. Later, helmets were made from 2 parts, the dome and a separately attached knob for the crest on the top. Change in ball shape. The ball shape evolved from hemispherical and relatively low to taller and conical, and then back to a lower shape with a larger neck guard. Evolution of neck guard. Gradually, the neck guard became larger and flatter, providing better protection for the neck and back of the head compared to earlier short and semicircular variants. By the way, this is also a Montefortino, not a Coolus. Simplification of decoration. The rich decoration of early helmets gradually simplified, became less frequent, and almost disappeared by the 1st century AD. Trends towards simpler cheek guard attachment. Cheek guard attachment simplified from the 2 rivets here to only 1 rivet in later types, and the cheek pieces themselves became flatter with characteristic cutouts, possibly influenced by Gallic culture. Decline in manufacturing quality. As previously discussed, towards the end of Republic era and start of Empire, there was a general decline in the quality of helmet manufacturing and finish. The Montefortino type helmet had a round or conical dome with a small neck guard. Viewed from above, the helmet was oval and fit the skull's shape. The material thickness on bronze examples found in Italy is between 1 and 2 mm on the helmet's dome. As the form developed, the neck guard gradually increased in depth and became more horizontal until it reached its full form in the 1st century AD. By the way, this one that I painted right now is a rather late variant of Montefortino. Another characteristic detail is the thickened lower edge, which was decorated with chasing. Its thickness was approximately 6 mm, and in later variants, as you can see, such decoration disappears. The helmet had cheek guards, but there could be variations in their shape, and we will discuss it later. And what is important, all known Roman and Italic helmets of Montefortino type are made of bronze. Unfortunately, Paddock lacks information on helmet weight, but this helmet from the Metropolitan Museum weighs 1.2 kg. But given the variation in dome thickness between 1 and 2 mm, the weight difference between the helmets could be significant. The Montefortino helmet usually had a special attachment for decoration, such as feathers or horsehair. Also, early crest attachment had a more complex construction, sometimes resembling some net ones. Over time, they became simpler, becoming a small truncated cone. Polybius mentions that use of feathers for helmet decoration. However, from my understanding, horsehair was a more common decoration. Polybius mentioned that legionaries wore 3 purple or black feathers, 1.5 feet high. Some soldiers on the Ahenobarbus relief wear long crests, possibly horsehair, which hang down on the back of the helmet to the shoulders. The depiction of helmets on the sculpture is not of high quality, but infantrymen on the altar of Domitius Ahenobarbus seem to be wearing Montefortino type helmets. By the way, a cavalryman is also depicted on this monument in clearly Boeotian helmet, broad-brimmed, belonging to Hellenistic times and resembling Polybius' remark that Roman cavalry was equipped in the Greek manner. And just a reminder, here is a separate video about Greek helmets. 5 main types of cheek pieces are distinguished for Montefortino helmets. The earliest are 3-disc type. This type is found on Etruscan helmets and influenced the shape of cheek pieces on later Celtic Montefortino helmets, and it is suggested that the origin may be linked to Samnite 3-disc breastplates. Here are 2 cheek pieces, one from Samnite helmet and the other from Montefortino. They may seem identical, but look closely. Samnite cheek piece of any form had 5 loops, while those on Montefortino helmet had only 3. Later, cheek pieces appeared with a curved rear edge and 2 semicircular cutouts at the front, likely originating from the Hellenistic examples. Compare with the cheek pieces on Greek helmets. There was also a variant of cheek pieces like this with deeper cutouts. And the latest type from the 1st century AD with characteristic large semicircular cutouts and this rectangular projection likely indicates Gallic influence. The cheek piece attachments for all types consist of 3 loops and an iron axis riveted to the helmet. A chin strap was used to secure the helmet on the head. The strap was attached to the center of the neck guard where a special ring was located. Then its ends crossed under the chin and fastened to special projecting pins on the cheek guards, meaning the strap from the left side attached to right cheek piece and vice versa. And if crossed straps under the chin seem strange, remember the Apollo Corinthian helmet from this video. And here is promised funny story, which shows that even with professional restoration of ancient artifacts, mistakes could happen. This helmet underwent 2 restorations. During one of them, apparently in the Campana workshop, its parts were seemingly assembled backwards. Look how cheek pieces are attached. The sides with 2 cut out faces towards neck guard. It seems that restorers confuse the Montefortino's helmet neck guard with the front visor found on Greek helmets, for example on a similar Thracian helmet. Such model was used in the army of Alexander the Great, and it seems that even he himself wore such helmet. There is a visor here too, but this one is definitely not a Thracian helmet. Note that under the neck guard there is even a ring for attaching straps. And also they added a decorative lion's head to the back, or to the front of this helmet. Such decorations are not found on Montefortino helmets. Similar lion's head are characteristic of early Etruscan Negao type helmets, and even then they are attached to the front and serve as a crest attachment point. So that's the story. It's unlikely that the restorer was a complete amateur, but still, the result is what it is. In the next video I will talk about Coolus and Imperial helmets, and this finishes our series on helmets, and we will switch to other topics. Thank you for watching and see you next time.